Welcome back everybody, DestinysJesus here. In this video we're looking at 3 levels of the solo FNCS All-Star Qualifiers. So what we're looking at is Hycros, who actually placed first in the final round. He got 112 points. I'm looking at his 3-kill win, all of his good mid-game plays as well as rotating plays that you guys can learn from, as well as going for refreshes. For our semi-pro, we'll be looking at somebody who competed in session 3. We'll be looking at T-Cube, who placed 135th. Basically, there's a lot of small mistakes that he was making. I'm sure a lot of you other players are making as well who are watching this. That's just preventing him from getting to that top 100 region and then proving himself in finals. Mostly just coming around this 22 to 23 minute region. For our beginner level player, we're looking at Ranks, who just finished off placing in the top 800, only missed it by a couple points, and there's a couple very minor mistakes that do have big implications when it comes to rotating mid-game and first moving that I'm sure a lot of you guys watching this as well are going to be making. As always, let's get straight into this. Make sure to leave a comment on what videos you want to see in the future, and also like the video. So for our semi-pro TQ shot spot, you can see he's landing on this right-hand side of Misty Meadows, and one big thing I think when it comes to these Osborne fights is don't try to milk it for too long and just try to immediately get the kill after you get a gun sometimes. So you can see this other player lands up top. Instead of being scared and running inside the building, no, you might have a better gun than you didn't really scout it. Instead he just straight up takes the fight, gets the guy low HP, other guy kind of panics, and then gets the elimination. And now he's basically got this entire right side completely to himself to loot and then play out his mid game. So for our first place player, Hycros, one thing you can see is landing kind of mid map in the corny house, and then he's just staying within this very select area. One big mistake I see people doing is whenever they actually have zone, is they end up over-rotating and going for really brave positions. In this position like this, where you know it's kind of pulling mid to top right, there's really no need for him to rotate. So he very simply just stays in this house. He has really good loot, but he doesn't have the extra shield. And again, as soon as he gets second zone here, center, he doesn't go and try to get even better position. Instead, he just stays very calmly boxed up. Doesn't need to worry about surge, since it's kind of a dead game. People are going for kills. Instead, he just plays very safe and conservative. Make sure he's refarming really safely, not taking any risks, which is the big thing in these stacked finals games. Okay, right here you can see our beginner level players in a pretty good spot. He's towards the edge of second. There's a lot of players behind him, most importantly, and there's nobody really in front of him on this third zone rotate. What you should do in this position, especially if you have a large amount of extra shield like he does, is just rotate early. For some reason, he just sits in this box for a long period of time here and starts tagging up all these other players that are rotating. And you've got to think, as soon as you tag up these players and play in front of him, if he doesn't get the kill, they're now just going to sit in front of him, hold him, and try to get revenge and go through all his mats. So you can see here, he holds another player that's next to him, gets beamed up a little bit, wastes a lot of mats there. Now he's got to continue to rotate with even more players in front of him who have rotated past him, and other players that are next to him now, and makes his rotate really expensive. Gets in towards the end of the zone, wastes even more shield, and he's completely on edge here, and he definitely could have gotten a lot further in towards the center of third if possible. Now you can see this payoff again because of the amount of time that he wasted, and the fact he's so edge here and he's not in the best situation at shield now, only one big. Zone pool is absolutely worst case max, and again he makes the exact same mistake, trying to get too greedy for trying to go for a play, trying to go for damage on the players on this rotate here. He sits in his box, wastes a lot of time where he could be swim rotating. Now he finally makes his swim rotate, and he just shoots at these other players. There's really no need for actually going for plays like this, especially with an AR. Just wastes more mats for him, and he could have had a nice easy rotate into this zone and in a way higher map count. One thing he does good, however, is the fact that when he's rotating in here, he actually gets a nice high layer in a second. You can see rotates above, gets above this other player in metal, and is on a nice high layer for fourth zone, which is good. But just the map count and the amount of shield used is really not ideal. One thing that TQ does really well during his mid game is basically completely rotating early away from Misty, especially on a zone pool like this. One good habit is always useful to get into is just avoiding playing edge, especially when the zone is pulling far, and getting in the habit of just reading where zone pool is going to be. A good tip that I've been saying for years now is just reading where the ocean is pulling. So you can see here's a lot of the ocean on this left hand side, so you probably know it's going to be pulling towards Believers or even towards Castle Split, which it does later on. It's really easy to get in the habit of doing this. So you can see what he does here is he just farms all of his extra metal. He's got really good loot at this point, not the best shotgun, but basically just avoids all of the fights and congestion on this edge side, and then keeps on rotating throughout the middle of the zone, getting up towards Believers. This is a small mistake I see people making the whole time, which is basically just going through a lot of their mats when they really don't need to. Whenever it comes to coming to an endgame, if you've got good movement, always try to keep your mats alive, since that's probably the thing that's going to cost you later on and get you killed, since you need to refresh too soon. So you can see he's in a position, it's 120 builds. All he needs to do for a very simple rotate like this is just mark where he wants to be and then just try to get in there with using as minimal builds as possible. He has 3 extra bigs which he can tank shots with, so you can see Builds a little bit as he comes in here, builds one box not properly in zone, tries to refarm a little bit using even more mats, then he's had to expand 2 extra boxes in. He does the correct thing, which is using wood on the kind of middle box, but this box here should be metal in my opinion to stop him getting sprayed. And now he's in the position where he's gone through a lot of mats, he's overcommitted a lot, and he's still not really in the best position. He could easily late rotated the zone perhaps, or just early rotated and tanked a couple of bullets, and then boxed up and used a big pot in metal, which would have been perfectly fine as well. It's a very small mistake, but it does cost a lot of mats, especially if you're thinking if he's making these same mistakes in all the extra games, just him going to need for a refresh sooner, him going to be running out of mats sooner the whole time. So during first moving, our beginner level player here makes a really bad mistake, which is trying to be too greedy with just making a very simple foot rotate when he has a pad. In my opinion, when you get first moving back like this, obviously you can mirror people's builds and follow their tarps in and get into ender zone. However, it won't be as cheap as just hitting a high pad or even trying to recycle somebody else's pad and then landing in the ender zone. And then you're in a really good position where he would have like 45 builds to play out second moving and get a refresh from there. If he played out his mid-game properly here and didn't make those mistakes I mentioned previously that he did, he'd easily be on 80 plus builds, going to second moving, and have a really easy end game. Instead, he makes a very bad mistake in the second here. He tries to spray for a kill on backside once he ends up in the boxer zone, and didn't fully complete his box. So you can see here, boxes the metal, which is obviously the correct thing to do. Comes down, boxes metal, doesn't place a cone above his head, doesn't even check upwards and check how if he's going to get pressure by height, since he's pretty much second height here, gets sprays from height, and then dies with a pad and good mats. Okay, so right here, this is probably the worst first moving rotate I've seen in a very long time, and it stems from a couple of key issues that is affecting his game overall and affect his placements in the other games as well. The first of all is just trying to box up in a safe position on low ground. This might seem like a good idea, but you're much better off being towards the center of zone and not landing in these edge zone spots, especially on low ground, because it basically just means your pads aren't as valuable later on since you don't go as high. Now, when zone pools absolutely max like this and you know there's an insane amount of builds in front of you, it might be just kind of the common play to just go ahead and use your pad, then land on front side, then start peppering. However, I think that's completely wrong. You could easily pop a pepper, which is obviously less valuable than the pad, start moving through the low ground, start coming up and starting getting on a higher layer. You could easily get up to this layer here, or even get a little bit farther forward, and then box while the other people are just scouting around. You can see all these other players aren't even going for holds or going for kills. Instead, they're just scouting, looking and getting information and planning their rotates, which is why it's a really good time to start moving. Instead, he just sits in his box, pads last second, fair enough, and then he lands in this very bad position again. Lands on the front side on a very high layer. He could have easily double dipped a pad, just lands on a pad backside. There's so many available pads that he could have hit again, such as this one. All of those he wasn't able to hit just because he padded very early from that backside spot. Now he rotates through, gets beamed, and the main reason for him getting beamed here, as you can see, is the fact he's completely isolated on this left hand side, where all these other players are looking back and getting hold kills because of how late he is. He got on the front side position, and instead of just keeping him on the front side or just trying to keep up with all the other players who are tarping, he instead let himself get caught up on the backside. Now there's loads of other players, and he's going to have to rotate with a lot of other players following him. Keeps moving through, burning through an absolutely insane amount of builds, and again he's so far on this edge of storm that he ends up getting held by this other player in front of him, and he basically goes through an insane amount of mats on a really easy first moving rotate and goes through all his movement items as well. Right here, this is a big thing that I see a lot of players making when it comes to getting a refresh, which is playing too scared. Oftentimes when you need to get a refresh, you should just commit into box and trying to get one, and you can see here he's got a lot of opportunities to actually edit and make a play, and he just waits way too long to go for them, instead of just trying to get as much placement as possible. If he gets a single one of these refreshes in a single one of these games and takes it from like a top 20 placement into towards a top 10 or a top 8 or a top 5, which is very easily damaged by getting one proper refresh, he'd basically guaranteed himself a qualifying. Right here, he doesn't commit to this fight at all versus other players wobbling him backside of the storm. Instead, just keeps on moving, keeps on running away from them, trying to stay alive as long as possible. And then he's in a position now where he's got 0 mats, finally gets the kill, but he's not able to get any of the loops. There's another player there, drops down towards low ground, and then dies from the backside. Right here on this 50-50 rotate, Hycross actually shows some really good fundamentals when it comes to using a pad and also where you should land. So you can see here, after using his pad, he's only going to peppers left, and one thing that he's doing is actually rotating slightly earlier. A lot of players wait for the last second or when zone actually goes ahead and starts closing in. He's doing about 3 seconds to spare to avoid those other players starting to rotate, pumping in, trying to block off the pad. He basically just completely avoids that, and he pads into quite an unusual position. A lot of players would go ahead and rotate and land on top of these builds here, which could be a good play if you wanted to recycle a pad later on, but he knows his only movement item now is peppers, so he's going to go ahead and land towards the dead side of the zone, basically takes away all that risk of other players fighting him and trying to W key, so he lands towards the dead side, gets in a really nice position where you can use his peppers later on low ground or to recycle a pad coming through the back end. So during first moving, High Chris is in this really bad position where he desperately needs a refresh. He doesn't even have enough mats to get into the end zone and look for a refresh there. This is basically how you want to play this situation. If you've got no mats on back end, what you should do is pause, make sure you take this time to actually look for a potential kill. Look for those players that you can see there that are rotating in front of you that you can potentially get a kill on, or look for players on backside like this other player that you maybe could edit and get a kill on. So he plays this really well, as I said. He pauses, make sure he takes enough time to look. Now he starts moving just before zone hits him. He could wait a little bit longer, but he doesn't want to get caught completely on that backside where he's likely to get held. So he starts rotating and mirroring these old builds. All these other players have rotated for him, so he can very simply just rotate along, and he spots where his refresh is going to come from. This mostly just does come down to confidence, but he knows if he doesn't go for this play, he's going to be in a really bad position and probably die without any kills or any more placement later on. So he goes in and rotates through. This guy's been editing a wall. Really easy play to look for. Should look for a low HP wall. Jumps straight in, hits a nice pump, gets the refresh he needs, and as soon as he gets that, and he's got most of the loot, doesn't bother checking for all of the loot, like swapping out his AR and stuff inside that box. Instead, makes some space. Now he doubles back for the loot and makes sure everything is secure and safe, and he can continue rotating on without really greeding anything too much. Zone plays back, and he's instead able to chill and take his time in this position. During this later zone position, this is third moving, going into the final zone, you can see how important having medkits are when High Chris plays them here in a second. Medkits obviously allow you to tank storm, make plays like that where you can just save a lot of builds and get in front side position. But one thing he does there is he starts popping it way ahead of zone just so he can let zone overtake him later on. And also one thing you're going to see in a second here is he doesn't actually leave this box. Obviously just running out this box, there could easily be somebody waiting up there, could be waiting behind a Ryan peak. There's a lot of plays that could be making, especially they see you popping a medkit in this box. So he decides to wait, see where zone is going. Most importantly, he's seeing where zone, if it's going to pull back to him, he can stay in the same box. Actually keeps going far, so now he continues rotating, make sure he sneaks through here, tries to get towards front side, and he's going to begin starting to play another medkit in a second. This medkit plays really works out well for him, tanks a little bit of storm, able to get a really nice amount of damage on the other player, drops towards low ground here, and in the final zone position, if you're on one of these layers that you have claimed, either low ground or high ground, you can normally guarantee yourself a top 2 as long as you win the fights that come towards you. So you're going to see he's just lurking around playing that backside of the zone. As soon as Fastroki takes on his low ground, this is a really nice play I like to see more players making, is he gets the wall low, he gets the floor low with his AR, then he pulls out the sniper, basically uses a heavy sniper, it knows that does 100 plus to a wall, jumps in, gets the kill there, gets all the mats. It should have taken a little bit more time in my opinion to make sure he claimed all the mats just to make this endgame easier for himself, but now he's left in a position 1v1v1 situation, and he makes a really intuitive play, which is to double check what high ground's doing. He knows on this HP he can't exactly drop down towards low ground and take the fight, so instead he decides to go up towards high ground, catches them with a big shot, ramps up towards the high ground's got no mats, gets all the loot, again makes the mistake of not quite claiming all the mats, but it ends up surviving it. And in this position here, you have to think about what the other player knows. They have just seen that Legend 27 in the feed has got 2 kills. Most likely they're thinking, especially because of the fact he doesn't pop any minis, they're thinking, oh, he's on 200 HP and he plays this perfectly. Goes towards the front side of Storm, holds all of the builds and just lets them die to Storm. Don't even take the risk of trying to pop a mini and go for the 1v1. Instead just let them die to Storm, guarantee that win for yourself, and that's a really well played endgame that allows him to take first in the qualifier finals.